The other thing that happens with all of this is everything is kind of conflated. You forget the order in which it happened. But when I think back to actually receiving that diagnosis, I'd just had the one ordinary CT scan, the X-ray that I'd had with my GP, and I had insisted, in fact, on the one the week after because I didn't think having another lot of antibiotics was going to hit the spot. And I just wanted to see, even though the first one didn't show anything ostensibly, the second one needed to show something. So the consultant at the hospital had knowledge of one of those, and I think the results of another one, but I'm not sure. But he probably just had the CT scan and was just a very good clinician. Good in lots of ways. His knowledge base, his openness. I guess he's like it with everybody, but he seemed to come to the point very quickly, and that was exactly what I wanted. My daughter was with me, and my granddaughter was only about 14 months old at that stage. My daughter and I had already talked about it, and we'd both agreed that it almost certainly was lung cancer, and I wanted to prepare her for that, and that we'd have a great big celebration if it wasn't, but let's prepare ourselves. And she wanted to be in the room with me when I heard that, and at the time I agreed, and she was, and she heard this very clever doctor say, very gently but very firmly, "You have a lump in your lung." And I just laughed because actually I'd never heard of anybody describing it as a lump. But that, of course, why do we do this? Different cancers have different names, don't they? Lump or a bit or a slither or a, And I thought, we have lumps in breasts, I suppose. Why can't we have it in our lung? But I then, again, heard it, became me the professional, right, can deal with this, and then out of that, within a second of suddenly remembering, I know how awful this is, suddenly remember my daughter's in this room. So I think I shook the doctor and the nurse that was with him, because I just shouted, "Suzanne, out." I just needed to censor that information myself, and I needed to find a way of being in myself just for this time, and that's how it was. And if ever you see this, Suzanne, I'm really sorry for doing it that way, because it must have been awful for her. But we face most things together. There is something about centering yourself, there really is. And I didn't know, because Jeff had died so soon after this astonishing diagnosis for him, and my father likewise, only all about the same age. I'm the youngest one, but it was, gosh, I need to work this out so that she doesn't think I'm going to die right now, because I did at least know that. Nothing that he'd do a different way until the end of our relationship, when he was passing me on to the oncologists. And then I suddenly twigged. By this time I'm taking a lot longer to twig things. And I remember suddenly saying to him, "Gosh, am I not going to see you again?" And I suddenly felt like one of those ducklings imprinting on the first person that they see. And of course he was the first consultant that I saw there. And the loss of him at that stage onto these strange people called oncologists, who I was yet to meet, just felt awful. And then again, they did something really clever. Well, he said, "Well, I'll see you around in the clinic." I never have seen him around in the clinic, of course, but it was nice reassurance. But the nurse came with me, so there was that transitional person, and that was very helpful. What he did brilliantly was everything from seeing Suzanne and Isabella and saying, "Hey, do you want to come in?" or stay out. And Suzanne said, come in please, but Isabella's playing up a bit because it's near her feed time. Bring her in, we're used to crying babies, and I'm sure they're not, so that was lovely. He used his first name as well as his second name, which, as you know, I like, and I like being given the option, especially when somebody's going to call me by my first name. I like to be able to do that back, or the other way, it doesn't matter which, as long as it's the same. But I liked the way that within seconds he had come to that point where, I'm afraid it isn't good news, we have found a lump in your lung, and then stopped. And then I let Suzanne out, but it was that stopping to allow it to sink in. And I think once Suzanne was out of the room, I did allow myself to cry just a bit. And it was just a bit. And again, I realised I was still hanging on to something. I mean, how daft can one be? But he allowed that as well. And again, I know that is a rare gift. And I know I'm quite good at that, actually. Just allowing to be with a patient when they are wanting to express that emotion. Even in my profession, and certainly in his, people want to make it okay, but you can't make it okay. You can just do as best as you can at that time, and this was the right thing, to just let me sit there. And then he did another good thing for me, which is, would you like to see the scan? And of course then, I'm out of that, and yes, please. I really would like to see this. And I told him there and then, I'm not one of these people that sees cancer as the enemy. I would love to visualize it and see it as this overgrowth of cells in me that is actually doing nothing wrong. It's just wrong because it's by default killing me. But that was a good move. And unfortunately, we couldn't get the scan up very easily. And so he said, well, I can draw it for you. And in that drawing, he explained it. And in that drawing, he put down a couple of words, each with question marks about perhaps what type of tumour this was. At that time, he needed all the other scans to confirm it. So it was like, you know, over 90% sure this is what it is, but we need the other scans. So again, for me, he did everything right, including that consultation was quite short. But short enough for me to be able to assimilate it, not get confused as I get every time now I go, partly from the drugs, partly from the tiredness. But also there were lots of things lined up which, okay, 80% of my brain was saying, oh goodness me, in fact in words worse than that, I've got a load of clients lined up for this week, how am I going to, I can't cancel them. And I've got all these other things lined up. But when I'd come to my senses and cancelled my clients, I realised that was quite good to have something every day, because every day they were learning something new about my particular tumour. And I suppose that's what I really want to emphasise for anybody who has this condition or is caring for somebody with it. I know, because I've now been told that I have months, not years, to live, but it wouldn't necessarily be that for everybody. And so when I rather, you know, offhand way say I'm dying, that is because I know I am, but it won't be the same for everybody. And I want to really put that across very strongly. But that's because that's the world that I've come from, where those things were faced. It's still my world, whether it's helping people in the theatre or doctors be truthful with their patients. It doesn't all have to happen at the same time. But there should be truthfulness in it. And he was good at that. Yeah, I do remember what happened then. I saw my daughter's face.
Must have been tough.
Mm. I just felt very, very mean for pushing her out of the room. And maybe it was. But maybe it meant to be that way as well. But I remember her face. And I remember little Isabella, who just in the family trend has her little gut instincts as well, even at 14 months. And she just put her arms out to me. So I had my reason to keep going and to live as long as I possibly could, as long as that wasn't a life that was anything like my poor mum's with emphysema. So Suzanne and I had both agreed anyway that life isn't just life. We don't preserve life at any cost. We know when it's time to go. But therein lies another little dilemma. Do we know, and do our loved ones know? But I remember Suzanne's face, and I shall die with that face, as well as all the other lovely faces she has. That wanting to hear that there might have been a mistake. She's been great ever since. Exactly. Her next words were, right now I want to know everything. Yeah. So we did. We actually sat down in that very spot outside the consulting room, and I told her everything. I didn't have a prognosis at that time, as I say, that came later. And I didn't actually want a prognosis at that time, which interests me in retrospect, because I always thought I would want to know straight away, but I didn't. But I did tell her everything. We also agreed that we'd help each other through this, so that's what we did. Oh, goodness me, the politics of dying. It was, who do I tell first? Suzanne had to be the obvious, so I got that one right. But everybody else just had to be on hold for a while, because I'm afraid as a professional you do have to take that seriously. And do I tell my clients? Do I need to tell them everything? Should I tell them nothing? And it was sod's law, really. I'm probably not allowed to say that, but it was a bit of a so-and-so, because my dear supervisor had just gone off for his summer holidays, which are very long. And your professional supervisor is somebody who, it's a very special relationship. It may have been since training, it may be till the day you die, quite literally, or in this case, my supervisor is somebody who I came to in the second half of my training, but we've been together all that time, and I value his opinion and his honesty, and his professionalism. So I knew that I could talk that through with him first, until I remembered holiday. And so I had to do a very grown-up thing. I had to decide for myself what to do. I haven't seen any patients for about 18 months, so I knew that we were in a slightly different game with coaching clients, but believe me, only slightly. So patients would be in quite a different scenario, and I'd have had to have made sure I saw that each person in person and had somewhere for them to be referred on to. in a way that I felt I just did not have time to. And so I was really relieved that I didn't have that kind of category of patient. But my clients, coaching again in a long-term relationship, which is what I do with most of the theatres I work in, there isn't much that's short-term with this group, because it's always with the top team, and it's a long-term relationship that has as many pulls on the emotion. Our working life is very important, and so there's very little difference sometimes. There is in what's in my head and how I work with those people to some extent, but actually in the emotions that are engendered with coaching and therapy, they're very similar. So I did have to go through in my head the immediate people that I had lined up in the next fortnight, and who would I just say I'm unavailable for the next week, fortnight to, and who would be mortified that I'd not told them. Anyway, I won't go into the ins and outs of how I made those decisions, but the telling was much more painful than I ever thought. I had Anton on my shoulder, even if he was on holiday, and I knew that to be a really reliable person on my shoulder. I had my own experience and what I have helped other people through under these circumstances to rely on. And I had in that the very cornerstone of my practice, which is honesty. And some kind of sense of responsibility to them as people. I have been lied to a couple of times under those circumstances for all the best reasons, but I've always felt that shouldn't have to have happened. So there's a couple of people I knew that I couldn't tell at that time, because I hadn't assimilated everything that I needed to.
Too much.
Yeah, and the worst thing that I could do would be to break down. But I did decide that it would make an absolute insult for our relationships if, for some people, the people that I told in those early days, if I didn't tell them the whole truth, because I knew that work was planned ahead. And I had no idea how ahead I could be with them. I knew I wanted to be with them as far as I possibly could, near to the end. But that had no time scale for me. And I knew that if they asked, I would have to say that to them. And the very first person I chose to tell was somebody I do a lot of work for. And he's also a good mate. And I made some reason why I had to go and see him at his house for this particular meeting, which wasn't unusual because it's a business thing. But it has this association of it. We are mates because we've known each other for donkey's years, and it's been in and out of this coaching relationship as well. And I think it broke his heart. And it certainly broke mine telling him. And it suddenly dawned on me that there were a few people that I was going to have to go through that with every time, because was I right in telling them? Even just the bare facts, they're intelligent people. So we just sat. No, I wouldn't. And that's the amazing thing about this, that some people might get this wrong, particularly my colleagues would disagree, many of them, on how I've done this. I don't care, because in my heart of hearts I know I've done this correctly. And there was maybe a bit of that line overstepped, but sometimes we do need to do that. And everything else in those relationships since has been as proper as they need to be, but they have an added dimension. And that dimension was important to me. And that was to realise that how bombastic of me to think I'm the only person that can give. They actually give back in just being and reacting in the way they did to my news. It's not like suddenly they've become my carers. No, that would be wrong. That they have become incredibly important in my life, well, they always have been, but yes, that I've learned so much from them. And I know that that has been a gift to me, a real gift. I'm in clinical mode when I do the telling, I think, now. That first one was different because I don't think I did protect myself enough, actually. And other times I feel really wrong for being too clinical about it, but feedback suggests not.